Greetings, human families of the planet Earth. Hopefully you can hear me. I am your host, Aseer the Duke of Tears. You are now tuned in live to Super Heru Radio. I hope all has been well. Inshallah, I hope everybody is good, and thank you for bearing with the obvious sabotage that Smog Talk Radio tried to put down on us for the past 2 weeks. But like I always say, one monkey don't stop no show. And you can't keep a good plan down, you know what I'm saying? So respect to everybody who came out and sent us messages of support and all of that, and are willing to put up with people's madness and trying to stop they can't stop us, but trying to delay the inevitable. You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, today is a lot of different days in one. But first, I want to let everybody know Happy Free National Constitution Day. It was on this day at 6 Chestnut Street at Philadelphia, Shechem-Exum, the original capital of what we now today call the United States of America and General Congress assembled. Those noble Moors, Moabites and Moabitesses, walked up in the 6th Independence Hall on 6 Chestnut Street and laid out the first document in modern era that laid out that all men, the first and only document to ever come out written by original people that came out and freed the world and said that told everybody in the world that all men are created free and equal. Now, we know that a man is a Moorish American national, but when we say that, we're also saying man as in man and woman. And we also know that based upon the erroneous status that they have elicited upon our people, we are at somewhat of a disadvantage. On that day specifically, we went in. Matter of fact, let me read it. This is from my Facebook post today. Let me get it out. Okay, here we go. A lot happened today historically. Back in 1492, on this day, we were formally expelled from Spain. Everybody know about that. Also a year after that, 1493, the next year on the same day, it happens to be Cristobal Colon of the Colon family was brought over here by Pedro the Negro, or who they call Peter the Nigger, who brought him not here but to Hispaniola, which eventually became Haiti and the Dominican Republic. However, the real event that happened on October 14, 1774, under the sign of Libra, that nobody wants to talk about, is that the First Continental Congress and General Congress assembled at Independence Hall at 6 Chestnut Street, then called Philadelphia, Shechem-Exum, the former nation's capital, our former nation's capital. The result of this historic gathering resulted in the resolution and adoption of the first 7 articles of the Free National Constitution, known as the Articles of Confederation in modern tongue. The enforcement of this law put all Moors who clung to the trademark titles of Al Europa outside of our constitutional fold. This rendered them undesirables, refugees, contraband, and stateless persons. This also made them unable to receive the national citizenship, birthrights, nationalities, and inheritances that came with being united. This also afforded them no protection on the high seas from the Vatican Sesqui trusts of 1666. This is what Honorable Elijah Muhammad and W.D. Farr referred to as the English sea lesson. So when he talked about my uncle does not know who is my uncle, he was brought over here from a trader 379 years ago, all of that is about this. As explained by Master Fard Muhammad, a.k.a. David Ford Eel. Okay? Yet in 1774, there was no U.S. government, remember? There was no United States in 1774. It was just a bunch of slaves to a colony, right? And that colony happened to be known as England. Not England across the water, but England as New England, meaning the 13 colonies themselves, and only themselves. The U.S. was not recognized by the world as having its own independence from Al-Bayan at the time. Being that England was only on the lands occupied by the 13 colonies, they needed Moors from the former government to vouch for them. That's why Morocco became the first nation in the world to recognize the United States. But when we talk about Morocco, we are talking about the Maghreb, or the Maghrib, or Al-Maghrebia, Al-Aqsam, Al-Sheikh Mexum, Al-Amazon, or Amazon, which basically means the Maghreb, or the Morocco of the farthest most west, the land of the lawless. Because the only laws that we followed over here was love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality. That's why we could put out a document that said that all men were created free and equal, because we are the ones who maintain the origin of humanity within our own DNA. So, again, what that did was put us in a situation where now that the 13 colonies needed us to vouch for them, the former Moors to vouch for them. The words Negro, black, colored were not added to the records of the new United States country until after it was ratified as a federal state in 1779. That means if we're going by the actual date that they say that slavery happened, which was 1865, that means that they perpetually promoted chattel slavery amongst the original people of the original lands for 85 years straight. The people who was enslaved in the 200 years or something out of that before us was the people that we allowed to come over here. It wasn't you and me. New U.S. country until 1779, therefore, with no money to pay its debts to the former lords in Albion, meaning the slaves of the colonies. They had no money to pay their debt back to the lords in Albion. That's George and them across the water, right? And the fact that they still had to pay us, the original government that was here already, rent to stay here, and for giving them arms to free themselves, right? They had to do something. So what did they do? They went to the undeclared Moors who were now put out of our country by not accepting the free national constitution, and stepped to them and said, come build my country up with me, and I'll give you more gold than you was receiving in your own. Ain't that what the English lesson said? Once the declared Moors agreed, they abandoned their estates to fall under the jurisdiction of the colorable state. To cement this Ponzi scheme, the trustees, a.k.a. the white colonists, a.k.a. slaves or serfs themselves, now called U.S., acted as the trustors, us, the Moors, meaning they acted like the people who gave them the money to set it up. They started acting like us over these Moors that was now undeclared. Then those Moors that decided to come into their country and help them build it up, what they did was they put the trademark slave designations on every state record, so that way when they entered into the state without their noble titles and nobility, that separated them from everybody else in the world as being a part of the original theocratic aristocracy going back over 66 trillion years, they could now be reclassified as something else. So in that, when at that point, once the slave designations fell on them in every state record, at that point, that's when they started flipping the manifest and started changing up the orient, or how things were oriented here for the new jurisdiction of the corporate United States. So in that, what that did was they started reorganizing everything, reconstructing everything. So they listed interior rivers like the Mississippi, which is the original blue now. They listed that as the Atlantic Ocean. Then New York is now listed as England, and then any Moors who used to be Moors now walking onto the colonies to help build up these fake United States people country, they are now entered into the United States as enslaved Africans. They're now entered into England into the enslaved Africans. But remember, England represents the 13 colonies, New England, the same way it do today. So when you, a free Moor, free woman, walking around outside the walls of the colony, once you decided you wasn't going to go back to your own nation constitutional fold, these people offered you a job. You said, okay, cool, I'll do it. But what they didn't tell you is that the job means that you're going to be perpetually broke down and beat up for the next 85 years if you survive it. So when the Moors enslaved, In England, the Moor now becomes an enslaved African from or imported into or from England to the shores of America, right? The shores of America represent the bay, Hudson Bay and all of that, right? When the Moor was then kidnapped and shipped to Spain, he was then called an American Indian. When he was exported to Portugal, he was called the Guinea. When he was exported to places specifically in the southern part of the African continent, he was called the Kafir, right? When he was imported to places like Old Bombay, which is now New Delhi, he was now called a Dalit, an untouchable, right? Then finally, if he was able to get shipped back on a good boat and got back home, he can now get off the boat as a Negro or a nigger who now got to watch the same slave that he helped free, his ancestors helped free, now treat him like a slave and give him a job. So when people talk about they don't know how our people got into this stage and all this other crap, they lying. When people talk to you about, you know, our black people, we've been here for 600 years and this and that, and, you know, you've been in bondage and the white man and we African men, they lying to you. Anybody trying to use a so-called black liberation theology is lying to you. It's just what it is. But the thing is, this don't mean that the people that's basically telling a lie are all liars. It don't mean that either, because some of these people have really believe that shit. They really believe that they are something other than what they really are. You have a lot of black people. Obadiah Ali said, be careful, because it'll be your own brother that put you back into slavery. He did. And whenever you get involved and you start building on stuff like this and you start going out and doing your thing and you find yourself in situations dealing with help, especially dealing with the law and shit like that, you as a Moor know already. If you coming into a place to get your paperwork validated or this and that, do you go to a white man or you go to a white woman, white man? If there's a black man, a black woman, a white man, and a white woman, and you go in there to do shit with your status, who you think you should go to help you do that? Don't go to the black people. Don't go to them, because they're going to give you a hard time. And it's usually some old crotchety black woman, so-called black woman, right, who've been working there for 20, 35 years or whatever. They never heard nothing outside of that and don't believe nothing that the white man or who else ain't tell her. I'm just keeping it real, because she's been fed a constant diet of African-Americanism and blackisms and all of this shit that had nothing to do with her original continence, who she really is, not only as a woman, but as a national of this so-called country. It's real talk. They set them up. Those are the gatekeepers. They set them up to block people from getting their shit done right, because they know that these people are so ornery and surly, and they've been working them like slaves for so long that they know that these people don't believe anything that they see their people do. So how is it that I'm, 35 or 45 years old, and I've been in this planet all of these years, but I don't know, but I never heard of this? And that's what happened. You know what I'm saying? They created a state or a schism where we don't believe anything that come out our own mouth. We only believe stuff that is actuated from another source, usually that don't look like us. Think about it. W.D. Farr, because he was light-skinned and all of that, if he came at a time when they had these African Americans thinking that they was anything else but a child of God. So if you think about it, a lot of these people who weren't able to really get into the temple at that time was kind of at a loss. So somebody had to tell them that they were something more than slaves and all of that. So here come the lightest man that you could possibly think coming in and telling them that they God. It helped. It helped people believe it. It helped people, black people, formulate it, because most of them at the time was so deep in their trick bag that anything negative about themselves they was believing. But you know how many Moors was in Black Wall Street, man? more than you think, but we don't think about that. Whenever it comes to speaking of Noble Drew Ali or anything like that, these so-called black scholars will be the most quieter than a mouse. You know what I'm saying? Because they have all taken oath, man, to not allow you or me to come up. There are certain aspects in our society, black people in our society. I think, what's his name said this one time, Booker T. Washington said this. And he said that there's a thing in the society where you have a group of people within it that like to big up all of the problems that we have as a people. And they focus so much on the problems that the people start to look at themselves as the problem and not what's causing the problems. And this is usually done because the people who are exacerbating these issues amongst our community found that they could actually get checks cut from being the bullhorn for whatever is engendering us, so long as we do it under the guise or structure of so-called black people or Negroes or anything else that has no nationality attached to it. Is nationality everything? Yes. Is God everything? Yes. So is nationality. Because guess what? Your nationality derives from that eternal that nobody has jurisdiction over. So therefore, they can't have jurisdiction over you. And then what happens is you now become part and parcel to your own self. You got to understand, when you are comfortable and acknowledge who and what you are in your purest state, meaning in a state that allows you to exist unmolested, that allows you to be the fullest you that you can be without any restriction, you are in the God realm. The more you are yourself, the more you put yourself back into the realm of the Most High, the arm, leg, arm, head, the perpetual universal source of ultimate enlightenment that will and continue to perpetually exist. Why? Because if you were made in the image of that which created all images, then that means that your image truly is the image or archetype of heaven, of creation, of love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality, which are the true tenets of the isonomy, right? The isonomy being I, son, I, mother, coming together in the universal form, again, of arm, leg, arm, head, in the feminine principle as Allah, in the masculine as Allah, come together in the form of the original Asiatic so-called black man, which really is an acronym for the Moabite or the Moab, which is a synonym for the Moor. Right?
I cook better than her. I don't even watch her.
Good job, man. So why are people in such a degree right now? Why is it so hard for them to consolidate around a common idea, a common goal? What is it? Is it because black people are just so disagreeable with each other that they're just so internally disjointed and hateful that they just can't seem to coalesce around a central thought and work with that? Well, think about it. Every time you get a little close to your goal, something always seems to happen to push you a little further back. But when you look at these pushes and these setbacks, sometimes you got to look at them archetypically, but sometimes you got to look at them literally. From whence do they come? Are they coming from, again, the people who look like you? Or are they coming from people who look like you but act like somebody else? I would say the latter. And like I said, due to the fact that most of us have no idea of the civic aspect of what our duties are to even be. Let's say you're not even Moorish American. Let's say you just believe you're a citizen of the United States. Citizens of the United States know less about the government than the people who work in the government. People who work in the government don't even know how the government works. That's why the government works, because it's self-serving. It's supposed to serve the people, because God created man. Man then created government. Therefore, government can never rule over man, because it was something that came out of the mind of man, who came out of the mind and soul of God. You see? So it has to, government has to be subordinate to the people based on natural law, based on the law of natural equity. Natural equity looks at that which should have been done as done. So when the Creator created us to fulfill the goal of creation, He gave us the jurisdiction and the ability to do that. You see what I'm saying? He ain't asked for his cut. You know what I'm saying? He ain't asked for some sort of tribute or gratuity for hooking people up, for giving you life. Ain't nobody do that. The only people who do that are humans. You know, your mother sometimes say shit like, at least my mother used to say shit like, oh, well, I went through all of these hours of labor and all of that, so this is the least that you could do. The least you could do is listen to me now and all that. And, you know, that's something, again, neither here nor there. But you can't use a natural act of creation to guilt me into eating vegetables. You understand? That's not what you use situations like that for. And I know, because I watched my queen go through it with the baby. And he loved greens. You know what I'm saying? She doing what I'm already seeing the difference genetically and how my genetic progeny is developing in a manner that I never did. Like, I never ate a damn tomato an avocado until 20. That's how stubborn I was. You understand? But his mother from the door been giving him green juices and crushed up fruits and berries and shit from the time that he came out the womb.
Like this morning, I did dandelion, which is really bitter, but I tried clouding it with a whole bunch of green apples. And, you know, he drank that and was like, I don't like this. I said, but I don't like it either, and I still have to drink it because it's getting cold, it's getting chillier, and you don't get sick, do you? No. I said, well, then drink the damn juice. Exactly. He was like, I said, some things in life are going to taste nasty, but you learn how to drink it down and get strong from it. Straight up.
So apply.
You can't cloud every green juice.
So apply that remedy now to the understanding of what you call it, an understanding now of nationality and nation building. Look, we can't all be right. You know what I'm saying? Keep it real. We can't all be right. As great as some of these movements are, they holding you up. They holding you up. Because most movements that are coming from people who espouse themselves as black, right, are movements that are diametrically opposed to you having any other status but that. So anyone that's espousing you to be black and all of that and talking to you about what you can do and what you can do with it. Look, a mouse can't do nothing inside the maze but work the maze. So if you are putting yourself in a position to be in a perpetual maze by constantly looking and glossing over the elephant in the room, that the fact that regards to who or what, when the white man went into Hawaii and did what he did to the Moors over there, Hawaii, whatever, for some reason, those Hawaiian Moors are still able to have a language. They're still able to communicate with each other. Same thing. They went into Hispaniola or whatever and broke this up or whatever. People speaking French, people speaking Spanish, right? Same thing. They came over here, locked everybody down, went into South Africa, went into these places, started to colonize the people and this and that, right? But they people still speaking a language today. They still speaking Wolof over there. They still speaking Hutsi over there. They still speaking whatever dialect they want to speak out there. How come you ain't speaking Latin right now? How come you ain't speaking Hebrew right now? How come you ain't speaking Amharic right now? You know what I'm saying? How is it that everybody in the world that they colonized and flipped over and did this and that to, even though that they did that to them, how is it they still got a language and a people and a custom? How come you the only people in the world with no obvious customs other than niggerdom that celebrate your poverty and your mental and physical abuse of yourself and of the system? The 13th Amendment and all of that turned you into a denizen. The prophet said you didn't need the 13th Amendment because the free national constitution is still here and has never been repealed. It's never been voided. It's never been not in effect. Therefore, technically, you never really lost your nationality. You just lost place of it. When you started to adopt the foreign gods and the BS that they was doing over there in Al Europa, trying to involve yourself in foreign wars and all of that, going against the original tenets as to why we set up the free national constitution in the first place. So once everybody in the world found out that the Moors was actually freeing people now, everybody wanted to come here. And it's been that way ever since. God, man. It's just become a perpetual catch-up game. And they always looking at you like you failing. Because a denizen, see, what they did was they flipped your designation. They made you come from your autochthonous status as a true American autochthon or Moorish American, and then got you to accept the foreign status by giving up your title nobility and then going into the United States without one. Then, through the 14th Amendment, 14th and 15th Amendment, they conveyed you as a Negro, meaning that you could vote in their country, but you can't vote as a citizen. You got to vote as a Negro. Which means that all of those people that came in through the Voting Act came in as property, able to vote, not as people. And that has never changed. The only thing that changed was that the man came and let everybody know what they could do. And that's what happened. It became a situation where we're constantly playing catch up with each other because we don't trust each other. Because believe it or not, we are still functioning under the same principles of what got us in the trick bag in the first place. The hell with Columbus Day. You know what I'm saying? Like keep it real. Like by the time he or them or whoever you want to say Columbus was and all of that actually came and did what he did, we were already in a state of going at each other's throats over shit. You know what I'm saying? So regardless to what, we can't put it all on him. We had something to do with this too. I don't think Peter Negro didn't really want to bring him over here. But due to the position that the Moors were put in after the capitulation of Granada, we were set adrift. So in our society, we've got two opposing forces. We were all infested with the Yaqub thing, so none of us is really exempt from that. But we do have a choice of how to express what side of that equation we was on. You either one of these Moors that was about perpetuating the actual nation and reunifying that with the eternal kingdom, and then those of us that wanted to make a kingdom of the earth and the earth alone, and chose servitude than to actually work with their brothers and sisters. There's this prostitute in the industry named Kula Booth. She's an African chick. And she just put out this thing about how she'd rather be, she said something real crazy, like she'd rather be a slave or something to the white man, right? She'd rather be a slave or some other crazy shit to the white man than to be treated like the gum under a black man's shoe. Fuck black men, is what she said. So, you know, a lot of brothers and people getting up in arms when you see sisters like that say crazy shit like that. But you also got to realize who's saying this stuff. You're talking about somebody who is a CIA asset, who they already had in human trafficking shit when she was a little girl. Well, not a little girl, but when she was young. Turned her into an international prostitute. This was bin Laden's booty call. You understand? They used her to help set him up back in the days when he was Tim Osmond, and in a honeypot thing that they was cooking up. She also was the side piece for Djima Hansu. She also was used in rodeos that intelligence agencies hooked up in Africa to have sex with all of these African billionaires and shit like that and compromise them. So really we're talking about a whore, right? But whether she a whore or not, at one time she still was or is a melanated Asiatic woman or African woman who at one time may have had aspects of self-respect and self-esteem. But when you stray after the foreign gods of Al Europa, you'll wind up doing anything. Don't believe me? Look at Halle Berry. Look at what she done. She's so psychologically disturbed behind this shit, behind that monster bullshit and shit that she's put herself through her life. She can't even make no real movies. And every movie she do make, she look like a damn fool in. Again, it's my opinion. You know what I'm saying? I'm not, you know, a lot of people might like her or whatever, but it has nothing to do with the fact that she hates herself. And you got to understand that little inkling of self-hatred that exists is what exacerbated and came in the minds of those boys that would rather, just like Kula Booth said, I'd rather be a slave to the white man than to be treated like the gum on the bottom of a black man's shoe. That's these Moors back in 1774. That's like, I'd rather go into this subordinate country that we set up than to be and actually stay in the nation with you. So I'd rather dehumanize myself, turn myself into a slave more than work shit out. And you wonder why the divorce rate amongst Western civilization is so high, especially amongst black people and shit like that. This is why. This is why. It's become a system in which the self-hatred that we perpetuate has now become the standard by which we think we are. And the people who know it the best and know it the most in terms of how they building and all of that, they want you to be nationless. They want you to be stateless and inheritanceless, if that's a word. Look at what they did to Trayvon. All of that was shrine and ritual. Okay? He used to go to the Shriners Hospital and do little Easter egg hunts and stuff like that when he was young. Why? Because his pops and Cheney's Lodge, Dick Cheney's Lodge out here in South Carolina is under the same jurisdiction, southern jurisdiction. So we know that the Shriners Hospital, and again, this is just based on my research of what I'm understanding, is there as an organ harvesting thing. You understand? because most of these Shriners are in their late 60s, things like that or whatever, and they have one of the highest organ donor finding rates of almost any hospital, believe it or not. Check it out for yourself, see what I'm saying. And it's interesting that with all of these situations going down and all of these children and these homes and stuff like that or whatever with the Trayvon thing, after he was murdered by the guy Zimmerman, the body was given to the authorities, but then the father and the mother couldn't find the body for a couple of days, around the same amount of days that they couldn't find the young brother Kevin Johnson's body, the one where they found him and they found that his body was opened up and filled up with newspaper. Now, the funeral homes and the state and these things, they have a racket. And this racket is them basically taking black. They've been doing this from the time of the all the killings and stuff that went on in Rwanda. After the Great Genocide, the British intelligence and the people went in there and was cracking. They said that they would find all of these black people's skulls split open, because what they was doing was harvesting all the pineal organs of all of the people that was killing each other during that whole conflict that was initiated again by CIA, members of MI6, and B'nai B'rith Mossad. So while all of this is going down, this organ harvesting thing has become big business. I just did. And they become so used to getting away with it that now that people are starting to do the knowledge, there's a whole lot of reworking going on, because the state's saying that the funeral home lost the organs, the funeral home saying the state lost the organs. So what that means to me, that still don't explain why the boy was found dead with his neck snapped, rolled up in a mat with blood on the floor, with blood on the wall of the gymnasium. Nobody even getting into that. So you already know that, along with the stand your ground laws and stuff that they got out here, they're already targeting these young blacks, because technically, being that they are 14th Amendment citizens, they're reduced to a form of denizenship. The denizenship is what we had the colonists under the jurisdiction of. And what denizen also means is partially an enemy of the hosting nation, you see. So in that, the way that they treat us is reflective of that status. Like with the Mexicans, they don't want them to become citizens of the United States. They want to create a 14th Amendment ship for them specifically, the same way they did for us, in which they would be on a road to citizenship. You see? But if they have children born here, then those children will belong to the state. They're born in the United States, but then they become naturalized based upon the law of jus soli, which is the law of the place that you're born. So because they're actually coming from a domestic nation like Mexico that has ancient ties to the United States, they want to keep the Mexicans at a perpetual, they always want to keep them on the precipice of gaining citizenship while never really gaining it. Whereas the so-called, but even them, they're not the original Mexicans, you know what I'm saying? They are the people today that we see phenotypically as Mexicans are also kind of late to the continent too. However, they were here long enough, you see what I'm saying, with us that kind of put them in a state where they could have autonomy or limited autonomy over themselves. But when we look at the roots again of the Inca, the Olmec, the Aztec, and all of that, we know that these people are a lot dark. You know what I'm saying? But they even started, the CIA and them started to even co-opt them too through the cartel ring that they got popping, because that's really who run the Mexican government, the cartels. Again, all to destabilize Latin America, which has been going on since since the assassination of Allende. So this more science that we think is just a domestic, or let's say another form of so-called black consciousness or black liberation theology, cannot be that, because it's always excluded from black events and things like that. Meaning that when you have a panel of people that are espousing Pan-Africanism and Blackism and African-Americanism, you as the Moor stand out. So the first thing they would do with you as the Moor on a panel like that, and I know because I've been a Moor on panels like that, is they first go directly to the fact that ain't no white man going to listen to no piece of paper, and a national agenda, a national identity, you already got one in terms of black. So the first attack from them comes in the form of nationality is not important. You see? Or nationality has nothing to do with the struggle that we as so-called blacks here in America are in. Meaning it bears no relevance legally to help get you out of any system that you're in. Therefore, correcting of one's status and declaring one's free national name and things like that are not as important as grassroots organizing or marching or acts of civil disobedience. Because that allegedly is the way for we as blacks, descendants of slaves, right, can come up. Oh, I see. You dig? So as you can see, because most of the people who are making money in our community, both when I say our community, I'm talking about our community, but also the greater so-called black or population community, whatever, they are coming from a different worldview. You see, we are coming from a different worldview perspective because of the fact we are claiming descent from people who were not slaves, which automatically then draws a juxtaposition to those that were, because those of us that are Moors know that most of our people fell victim to their own slavery by not holding on and honoring their mothers and their fathers. There's a passage in the Bible that talks about Moab being cut down and never being able to rise again. So you'll find that when you really are about this thing, that a lot of the obstacles that you come from, not saying that you're going to get obstacles from white folk or the police. However, when you know how to conduct yourself, for the most part, you know that you don't waste time on the underling. The minute the underlings start giving you the problems and moving, trying to take it south, you immediately ask to speak to the watch commander. The watch commanders are the ones that are being trained now to know how to talk to people who really know what they're talking about. So because most of the state governments now, the employees have to bond themselves, the state is stepping back from them in terms of these liens and all that. Remember, the lien that the United States government shut down for is based on the default. The defaults are coming from the United States not being able to pay its debts directly, because at the same time it's funneling money out to pay the private foreign banks that they've been paying since the New Deal. While at the same time they're doing that, they're not paying the debt to the nationals who they had to make restitution to in the form of the document HJR 75, which is a petition and a ratification of both sides of the House, who agreed that as the Moorish American nationals became in awe, the premier aristocracy, theocratic aristocracy in America, they are the only de jure people on the planet. They're the only de jure people on the planet because they're the only people that have a nationality that predate the present form of government and all present forms of government that conform to the aspect of the limited democracy or limited autonomy that was expressed in places like Grenada, where you had Moors or Mohammedans, and then you had Christian serfs under them, and then you had Moorish Christians and so-called Hebrews all living together, and Indians and Hindus and everybody else. But the actual government is running shit to the point where everybody is becoming nationally recognized, and everybody's being provided for. But again, the Moriscos in that point wanted their own thing. So you mean to tell me that October 14th is Columbus Day? Before that Columbus Day, meaning when he came over here, October 14th is also the day that the Moors capitulated, or Boabdil, who was the last caliph at Grenada, capitulated, was also on October 14th. And then you mean to tell me that the day that we created the Free National Constitution was on October 14th? What's up with the number 14? Well, that's knowledge culture, we already know, right? All being born to power and refinement, which is the truth. But it's also 14 in the aspect of the element carbon-14, which represents death and resurrection through etheric communion, meaning you're born, you live, you love, you die, you're committed to the earth, you transliterate the soul transliterates the body then into the ether that seeps through the soil, that goes back up into the atmosphere and then condenses back down into the earth in the form of rain that falls down on the body of every man and woman on the earth, who then also have babies, and then the whole cycle continues. That process of carbon-14 is the actual element or ritual that was spoken of in the form of Osiris, Lord of the underworld, Lord of the dead, who was cut up into 14 pieces, you see what I'm saying, and thrown in the Nile, the water, the rain, the meme, the water of life, out of which bloomed the reed that grew out of the sediment in the water of which Aset pulls out, turns into a golden phallus and uses her sexual magic to sit on the throne, or what the devils and the Scottish Rite will call the Pindar, and bring forth Heru, who then fights Set, his uncle, who did not know he was his uncle, right? And fought to a stalemate in which Heru takes Set to Ma'at, the court, the universal court of law and justice, and Ma'at finds Set wanting and then banishes him to the land of the farthest most west, which, again, is the Maghreb. Set being the brother of Aset, again showing the strife within the family bloodline between the Moor, Osar, and his brother-in-law, Set, or Setiphon, right, who is caught up in the relationship of his sister, who is Osar's wife, the Moabitess queen. This drama that we have been in for the past 66 trillion years has now come to a crashing halt. And in the process of that, it has opened up the way for we to fulfill the prophecy of not only the prophet Novajarli, but even the Hopi. In the prophecy of the Red Kachina about the black race with the red hats. You know, all of that in league with the fact that we are a part of something real that identifies us in a manner that is not only spiritual but geopolitical, geo-socio-political at the same time. The metaphysics of our rebirth and the metaphysics of our renaissance is wrapped up in how we choose to deal with it. So, in the aspect that most so-called black people are Christian, the type of Christian they are is what's also enslaving them and giving them the problems that they're dealing with. Same thing if they were Muslim, same thing if they were something else, because they're dealing with these things as remnants and remade models of what their original tenets are. If you descend from the original people who created it all for everybody to partake in, then that means that your history is just as important, if not more important, than everybody that's been benefiting from it. But it seems that when you step up and actually sit in the place and wear the crown, which is the turban or the tarbouch or the fez or the plume feather or whatever, people look at you as if you're somehow betraying some sort of black code, when the black codes were originally created by the losers of the original Confederate War between the Cherokees, who then went into the state records and started switching shit up. So all of the white serfs that was now going to get free would have to be put in these certain positions. But once these same Moors were now put out and kidnapped and put into other things, when they were now put at the bottom of the system, and these white boys started using the same thing that they set up to keep them out, to keep the Moors out, and then use the color thing to even further induce that. Like, this is a science. One thing about racism is that it's a science now. It was an emotion at one point. You know what I'm saying? Like, people think that bigotry and racism is the same thing. It's not. Bigotry is racism is like, I hate these people, or that's the perception. I hate these people because they're black, or they're white, or they're Mexican, or they're Jews, or they're whatever, right? A bigot is somebody who's like black, who basically hates on the people that he is. Right? So like Uncle Ruckus is a bigot. You know what I'm saying? But whereas racism and bigotry was an emotion brought up based on the psychological operation of civil rights, which was, again, an operation to further move people away from their nationalistic identity, in the fact that the UCC and the civil rights movement both had their beginnings and underpinnings within 1955 and 1956, which coincided with the classification Truth A1 that CM Bay filed on the Moors at the National Archives and all of that. And our status was then classified under that same Truth A1 with the Department of Justice. Also, most of the original consuls of the Maghreb, meaning the temples of the Maghreb at the time, which were the Moorish science temples, were now being reorganized, and all of the law and civical aspects that dealt with it was taken out. Why was it taken out? It was taken out on purpose. Why? Remember what the prophet said. He said, be careful, because it'll be your own brother that try to put you back into slavery. Remember. So with this whole thing about us being property and chattel or human capital, this is why you can be murdered and the things that they do and take out your organs and sell it without you knowing, and none of that, because technically you're an enemy in the field. Technically, you are the one who became a traitor against the government that helped set them up. Remember? Morocco was the first government to recognize the United States, but there was no kingdom of Morocco at that time. Morocco was the Maghreb. So the empire was wherever the emperor and the subjects of the emperor were. And these were the Moors that was from over here. How can we prove that? Because the United States Center for Genetic Research just put out a document that basically said that the African-American male Y chromosome can be traced back over 385,000 years. Huh? Huh? How can that happen? How, if I'm brought from Africa, I thought Africa was the oldest. Well, that's when you're dealing with the woman. So look at what they've done. They gave you Lucy, right, who is the daughter
I'm going to mom on my phone.
They've become a thing. So whereas Lucy, the great descendant then of Venus Hottentot, Venus Willendorf, who really is the Empress Europa, or the goddess Europa, which is why she was worshipped by all of the cave white people that lived on the island, because that's where the Moors was bringing the Neanderthals to be re-civilized and reintroduced back into humanity through crossbreeding and hybridization and eventual glacial isolation. This is why the white man today suffers from cave trauma, isolation issues, things like that, because this is their culture. They were wrought through different means of control. So this document, like I said, it says that a photomicrograph shows an X chromosome at the left alongside with a shrunken Y chromosome. The Y chromosome is passed down exclusively from the father to the son and can serve as an indicator of male line diversity. Scientists say the African American male's odd genetic signature suggests that the Y chromosome's lineage goes back further in time than they thought, perhaps due to interbreeding with other populations such as Neanderthals. Now, I already told you in shows past that they already said that anybody that is not Asiatic is a Neanderthal, right? So what Neanderthals are they talking about? They talking about the same Neanderthals I'm talking to you about that was germinated or whatever and moved back and forth from the Caucasus to the Yucatan to Europa. Europa being the goddess who gave up the continent or let the continent go there, and they be named after her. So this Y chromosome that they found in this African-American male shows a direct line diversity that goes back over 385,000 years between the line of father and son. That means in the African-American, a.k.a. Moabite, Moorish genetic structure, the line between the father and the son can be traced back consistently. That's why, regardless to with black men, when they get caught up, you know how when a bitch comes and she says that, oh, this is the father, and then it turns out later that he ain't the real father, but he been paying for this baby all the years, and he want to get out of it. He can't get out of it because this is what they're using. They're using this fact of regardless of whether you the father or the not black man, you still the father. Because that line between father and son, once it's established, should not be and cannot be by law broken. But if the father is in an inferior state, then the domicile of habitation, which is the realm of the mother, has to be superseded over the domicile of origin. The domicile of origin is the father. The domicile of habitation is the mother. So when the child dwells with the mother, the child is dwelling in the realm of habitation, a habitat. You see? Because all 14th Amendment citizens, human capitals, are beasts of burden. Okay? So that means then that the domicile of the father, the domicile of the origin, is what they use to draw from to support what the obligation is. But because the father is a denizen or 14th Amendment citizen or a black or Negro or colored, which translates then to chattel, he has no specific rights other than the breeding rights that they give him. So if you want to have sex with this black woman, we're going to charge you because we own her, and she's okay with it. Because she's given us permission to go into your bank account and all of that and take all your stuff. Why? Because it's proven then based on, what is it? Who is it? It is what's the name of this thing? It's published by the American Journal of Human Genetics. Okay? So the study focuses on the analysis of a DNA sample that was obtained from an African-American male living in South Carolina. Do the knowledge to that. When you read that, South Carolina, read this. Look at the South Carolina Free Moors Act, when it said that only Moors, Jews, Hindus, or Indians are excluded from slavery. Why were they excluded from slavery? Because they're before the slaves. They're the ones that allowed the slaves or brought the slaves over. The slaves being the Slavs, which were the Neanderthals that they were trafficking back and forth, and in the process of doing that, creating a whole new race of people. Right? From the book, The History of Conquest of Spain, by the Arabs and the Moors, it said when the Moors were driven out, thousands took refuge in the south of France, who, abhorring the Roman Catholic persecutions, became Huguenots, and that of these, many immigrated to South Carolina. Same thing with Charles I. Charles V, when he set up shop in North Carolina through the Carolingian dynasty. But back then it was Carolina. Right? Peep this. Where was Noble Jew Ali from? The Carolinas. What does it say? Hold up. Let me get it. George Washington went out of his way to praise the Moroccan Muslims, i.e. Moors, on several occasions and suggested that he would welcome them at Mount Vernon if they were willing to work. That's the English C lesson, evidence of that again, if they were willing to work. Why would they have to work for the United States? They were willing to be at Mount Vernon if they would work, meaning if they would give up their titles and come into the United States as second-class citizens, which then their titles, which have now been abandoned, now become the property of the United States, that the United States can now use as a mortgage-based security for them to accrue a line of credit with other nations by us giving them consent to do so. Reports of Qurans in American libraries go back to at least 1683, when an early settler of Germantown, PA, brought a German version to these shores. These are the Huguenots. These are the Moors, the Huguenots, the Hessians, the Albigensians, the Cathars. These are the original Grail Christians, or what we call the original Franks, the original Noir men from Normandy and all of these ancient Moorish bloodlines and all of that, who some were forced into gypsyhood and then the others were forced over here and then came back home. These were the Moors who allied themselves with the traditional Moors and had their way of government and modeled their way of government after their brothers and sisters, us that was already over here having our government like that. So by the time they adopted it, they now had to fight for the right to go back to living like that, meaning that they fought the Revolutionary War to go back and speak English and be how the original Englishmen were, who were the bays of our Albion and all that. And we speak in English today. And all other nations now had to fall suit to that. Why would John Adams and a cluster of farmers in Connecticut Valley, why would they have copies of the Quran in 1806 if they wasn't dealing with Moors? You understand? We're dealing with the fact that our nation, our people are the only people on this planet that were relentlessly pursued. That's why the Vatican is disestablished now. This is the law of retribution. They relentlessly pursued us to such an extent that that for generations we wouldn't even talk about Moors or anything other than niggerdom or whatever it is we were supposed to be involved in based on the fact that we were blacks and all this other stuff on this history. So what they did was they set up the Jim Crow thing so that way you had all of these smart niggas from the north who couldn't get no work. They felt they would go down south, right? Then all of the niggas down south who felt they couldn't get work and stuff like that, they would go up north. But Jim Crow was on the road, so most of these people had to take ships, steamships, freight trains, things like that. All of that stuff was owned by Rothschild and them. So you understand this is a huge way of money. In 1492, on this day, when the Catholic Spain expelled all the Moors, the Osman Ali Bey Moors, the Ottomans, welcomed all of us over there and sent the whole Turkish Navy, over 200,000 ships, man, came there to pick Moors up, take Moors anywhere in the world they wanted to go. They don't talk about that in history, though. That's why they hate the Turks to this day. That's why they had to eventually get the Turks to give up the Fez, because that was a symbol of them being allegiance to us. The only people that's wearing fezzes like that now over there is the King of Morocco, Rashid, the King of Morocco right now, and I think there's a king in Kenya who wears one, a young boy. But other than that, the only ones that wearing feathers like that in Africa, places like that, is us, as well as in like Mali and Somalia. But again, these were all part of the old empire. You dig? So, as we are the sons of Mesha, the son of Chemosh, right, who was the king of Moab, who had the possession of the Dibonite stone. The Moors, the Moabites, are the ones who have fulfilled that prophecy as having the eel in the bay here on earth. You dig? As it is in heaven. So this has become this became the overall, means by which the so-called prophecy is starting to be fulfilled, where you have all of these different events popping off at the same time, while nobody's really taking responsibility for what it really is. And what it really is that everybody else in the world thinks that they're where they're supposed to be when they're not. Everybody's supposed to be where they were supposed to be at. It's a difference in thinking. It's a difference in relative, or what they are now using in terms of our community as a form of cognitive dissonance. When they wanted to get rid of the peace movement, what they did was they got members of the intelligence community to go in and do drugs and get down with the movement and all of that, and promote higher levels of escalation, which would lead to violence, like what Bill Ayers did with the Weatherman Underground, where they blew up all them federal buildings and kill all them people. He wound up being a teacher with tenure at some Ivy League college. He recently came out dissing Obama, which is crazy because him and his wife allegedly used to watch Malaya and this nigga's kids and all of that. So remember, this is a double agent. This is somebody who acted like he was for the peace movement, but he was there to put such a negative light on the peace movement through all of the crazy drug-filled rage, blowing up buildings and stuff that they would do, that the legitimate peace movement would then have to be disbanded. And that's what they did with the Panthers and everything else. Everybody's still praising Angela Davis. That's all good. But just like Eldridge Cleaver, as great as he was at one time, he wound up becoming a campaign manager for Reagan. Married a white woman the same way Angela Davis did. That's success? No, that's evidence of the fact that you was always a part or descended from those people that wanted to keep these people going, and at the expense of your own nation, you would dehumanize yourself other than to do right and bring yourself back into obedience of Allah. And obedience of Allah is observing the principles: love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality. The WIC program was started by the Black Panthers. How the government wind up owning it? Real talk. Head Start was started by the Black Panthers. How the white man wind up running it? Food stamps. That was started by Black Panthers and these black people. You know what I'm saying? Like how we get like that? How they flip it to such a degree where it's like that? So they'll always have all of these other people, entertainers especially, who come because they get money, but they get money by exacerbating how bad your situation is. When your actual situation is probably better than the videos you watching. You see these niggas on the street in $1,000 cars and gold chains and shit like that sitting in front of projects and all that. They ain't really doing that in real life. You don't get money and do that. You can do that. And you could have done that more back in the days than now, because at least niggas had honor back then. My uncle said it best. He said once hoes started selling pussy for less than $50, it destroyed the legitimate prostitution business. And it was destroyed up until the late 80s when the Wall Street niggas wanted to get back into the game and started funding escort things so that way they could be in control of the places where they would cheat on their wives at. That's real talk. This is another quote from a book where it says, here we go. The aspect of real law then only falls on those people who can actually be represented as a lawful government, and that's us. And your temple is that. Don't let these dudes fool you. A lot of people in the temple don't even know that the temple is your real government. They made these people feel like the governments that they would start outside of what the prophet was doing, but by utilizing elements of patriotism documents, Freemasonry connections, as well as law enforcement or intelligence operations to be able to get money. Why did they do this? Who did it? Well, let's read. This is an excerpt from a book called The Brighter Light. Siembre approached 12 men who were left responsible for the Moorish Science Temple and the national chapters after the death of Noble Jew Ali. 12 men, Jew Ali's personal adept chamber, were offered as a whole $40,000 to cease with the original teachings of the history and philosophy of Noble Jew Ali. The offer was accepted and the main adept chamber did disband. This occurred around the year 1929, the year of the great sellout. A few of the chamber members moved on to start very successful personal movements, usually under the guise of some sort of religious mission or church-like institution. Many other chapters of the Moorish Science Temple throughout the country continue to operate totally unaware that the main chapter had for all practical purposes ceased to function, and the Moorish Science Temple experienced a reaction similar to that of the serpent whose body and tail continues to move long after the head had been cut off. CMB, when the main adept chamber accepted the offer and left the scene. A serious struggle for leadership and control of the Moorish Science Temple erupted, and it greatly divided the organization, leaving it somewhat confused state. The government infiltration and intervention, as mentioned earlier, was not only a major problem Noble Jew Ali had to deal with, but the thorn in his side was his own brothers. So these niggas seen how much money the prophet was pulling down, and they made it like he was on some greedy shit, and then started to set up other fake businesses and stuff, and didn't pay anything back, and just was just horrible with it, because they knew what had happened. This is real black history I'm about to tell you. You know what I'm saying? Everything has a beginning, and every beginning has a new beginning. And specifically amongst our people, that beginning was germinated around the year of 1926. And get it out. Hold on one second. Thought I had it. Here it is. Okay. Yeah. Here it is. Now, like I said, when it comes to order in all things, these things came into order based upon a series of events in terms of us as Moors reconsolidating and coming into a certain awareness of where we are today and why you're able to do a lot of things you're able to do. In 1926, hey, we're back. Okay, let me get it out quick because I already see what's going on. Okay, everything that went down with us internationally started after the rise of the Mahdi. The event of the Mahdi taking control of a lot of the things was a reunification of the Asiatic Brotherhood on a spiritual sense, but it also reawakened an element of the empire that was on its way out, that everybody seen the writing on the wall. So everybody agreed that they was going to set up their own little fiefdom and eventually agree to refund and support everybody for a certain amount of years. This pact was ratified in the creation of the spiritual movements that came out of that, which was the Canaanite temple, the Ahmadiyya movement, and the eventual UNIA movement, as well as, again, the Mahdi, the movement of the Great Mahdi, out of which we get people like Dr. York and people like that, and Faisal and these Moors. So in 1926, on January 8th, Ibn Saul, the Sultan of the Najd, was crowned king of the Hijaz of the Masjid of Al-Haram in Mecca, and he elevated the Najd to the status of a kingdom. The Treaty of, that was in 1926. For the next 5 years, Ibn Saul administered the two parts of the dual kingdom as separate units. On September 23rd, 1932, the main Saudi dominions of Al-Hassa, Qatif, Najd, and Hejaz were unified as the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This is under foreign policy. The Kingdom of the Najd and Hejaz could pursue its expansionist policy by British arms supplies because of its close relationships with the United Kingdom. Why? Because after he elevated the status of the kingdom, in the next year, in 1927, a treaty was signed between King Abdulaziz and the United Kingdom, which then recognized the monarchy, the true Islamic monarchy, as well as the theocratic aristocracy that was being reestablished based upon what not only the Mahdi did, but all of those Moors that did at Khartoum and leading up to that great event that got the head of Captain Gordon cut and the false fez of those Turks, those illicit Turks now that were working against us, was then cut down. And then in that set the way up for the establishment of that, because prior to that, none of the so-called Arab monarchs could do that because they weren't monarchs. They were sheikhs and caliphs. There was no established actual Islamic monarchy. But the monarchy of Islam is based upon the surahs dealing with the house of Al-Bayt, which is the house of the eels and the bays. According to God, this is not, according to me. This is what God said it is. So in that, if you believe in the word or the aspect of the ecclesiastical word, you would understand that. What you'll notice in black liberation theology is that they'll build on a lot of the metaphysical aspects of Asar and things like that. But they don't really put a lot of that into executive practice, meaning that spiritualism is not seen as a viable means of black liberation. How can you have a movement or any movement and you being and having the direct power of the divine spirit and see that that is not an advantage when it comes to war? As decadent as the Romans were, they always invoked a god or a goddess in their campaigns. So that way they would always feel they on the ecclesiastical right of what they was doing. So again, this is the chickens coming home to roost, if you will, which again shows you the fact that as much as they espouse all of this right way and right speaking and right action, these actions are based upon no direct correlation with any direct spiritual value that's established in the world as meaning something other than an ideological idea. So Allah is not like Jesus in the sense that you could pretty much say whatever you want about Jesus, but you can't say certain shit about Allah. You know what I'm saying? Same thing with Jehovah. People really use Jehovah too much like that. You'll hear Yahweh and you see who's really pumping that. That's, the Hebrew Israelites and these people. And believe it or not, they really close, especially with the garb and all that, they on point. However, the study of the apostolic succession coming or translated to them through a Jesuit teaching system is what's driving them crazy. Once they realize that they following a Jesuit system, they'll come out of it. But that order or that movement, and I'm not trying to judge it or people in it, but that movement is very hostile, has a lot of anger in terms of identity that is still struggling through and has been since Yahweh ben Yahweh. Because think about it, this happened in 1929, so that means mostly everybody that came after 1929 was coming out of that situation or descended from that situation. This is Daddy Grace, this is Father Divine, this is Elijah Muhammad, this is everybody, man. Everybody that came after that in some way became privy to that. So this don't mean that they was all, coming from the same cloth in terms of they all was descended from these 12 people that sold out the initial intent of the temple, but it is to say that all of these movements reflected the same aspects that I read about in that excerpt. Look at what Planned Parenthood's goal in terms of birth control was for the new millennium. It was a memorandum that was put out by a guy named Bernard Berelson, who at the time was the president of the Population Council. There was another guy named Frederick S. Jaffe, and they was part of the world population, and they outlined examples of proposed measures to reduce United States fertility. Think about it. After the 1960s, they started first talking about the test tube babies. That's when women started having problems with births, because abortions and stuff like that was not necessarily legal at the time. So at the same time abortions got legal, this is when fertility clinics came out. And that's when you started seeing per capita arise in the problems or people having problems having babies. Because Planned Parenthood, we understand, is a part of the World Wildlife Fund and IMF and all of that. And all of that is United States privately owned. But it can do that because the United States, again, is not a country. Right? So the first thing was restrictive family, a postpone, get people to avoid marriage, and alter the ideal family size. Then number two, we need to encourage increased homosexuality. Then number three, we educate for family limitation, like what they just did in China when that woman, when they found out that woman was pregnant, they ran up in her house and pulled her out and forced her to have an abortion. That's where they trying to get the United States to go. That's where they really trying to get it popping to. Fertility control agents in the water supply, fluoride, everything else. And number 5, and most importantly, encourage all the women to work. Because getting the women to work outside the home means that they won't be able to control what happens to their children. And they'll make themselves believe that they have their own life outside of their children. And this is when they can come in and molest and rape and murder and do all the things to the children, because they got the woman all doped up in the club trying to get a rapper or a brawler or whatever else. And this is for light-skinned black people, dark-skinned black people. It don't matter. Spanish-speaking black people, Chinese-speaking black people. If you are somebody that's in a country right now and you are darker or as dark as a paper bag and cannot pass phenotypically for the lighter echelon of wherever you live, you'll probably agree with me that wherever you are, people want to treat you a little different because of whatever stigma that they have already instituted you with, whatever that is. And that's what happens, you know. People just get caught up in doing the wrong thing perpetually, so much so that they believe that it's right. So you and I have been provided for. And Martin Luther King didn't do it. Malcolm X didn't do it. Garvey didn't do it. Elijah Muhammad ain't do it. Moore Science Temple is the only thing of America, is the only thing that you are and can be at the same time. Because what you can be is more than you are. Because you are a more. You just don't know. But more again, or more, or more, or mo, again, that's mother. That's all the great things that we love. Mother, mood, mode, module. These are all things that represent components of a functional society that we are the progenitors of. So the culmination of the tribe of Manasseh, which is what you are, that lost tribe, the tribe of non-persons that they want to act like, oh, I don't know why I don't know how to. You have to understand, black people have made millions of dollars on making movies that constantly reiterate a not even 20% ratio aspect of your ancient experience from 1492 to 2013. That everything that they have showed you about you is false and convoluted based upon them not coming right out and saying exactly who and what you are, because they know. If a Jew don't have to take off his yarmulke, or a Hindu don't have to take off his fez, a woman don't have to take off her burqa. I remember when they just came out in France, and they had a thing where in France they came out and they said that women can't wear hijab and shit like that. And they were flipping on it and flipping on the law and all of that, and the Muslim women wasn't having it. This is in France, where Muslims or Muslims ratio is very high to the traditional French. So the white people over there is getting squeezed out too, or the people who are perceived as white. And now that you know French is also the second most title-obsessed country in the world, they're now in that position where, you know, they're having to reorganize how they do stuff. You see, Spain got a Negro politician who they call a monkey every other day in the paper and all of that. But I bet you if she had her nationality as a Moor, as the first Moor elected to that office, they said that she was the first black woman. But if she was the first Moor elected to that office, that would be something totally different, and they would not be able to talk about her like that. But she's not in her proper person either. She's a civil servant, like your boy in the White House, who baby moms got popped out of the White House lawn. But again, that's just speculation. Wink, wink. You know what I mean? And it's sad because even if that ain't true, that's what's being said. Because part of the game is to get me caught up in it. Yes. It's to get caught up in it as to who and what she was, why they did it. Why they did it, why they keep doing this stuff. When is it going to stop? Who's going to do something? Why doesn't he do anything for us? If you was one of the people that voted God twice and thought that he was going to do something ultimately for people that look like us, you were fooling yourself back then. I don't give a damn what color you are. If you are taking the job with these people, then you got to know that you are involving yourself in something that is primarily satanic. I'm not even getting into all the rituals and all of that. All that Illuminati stuff and all of that, I built on all of that stuff in the early 2000, 2002, 2003. And ain't nobody put out anything after we did those two tapes, Metaphysical, Hip-Hop Currency, that I saw that went really beyond anything that we just said in the crib that night. For those people that didn't may want to see it, you can check out www.aseertheducateers.com. So I don't really get into all of that type of stuff no more, because all that, unless we're going to really deal with doing the spiritual work to combat all of that satanic ritual and stuff, it's going to keep happening. If the Antichrist that they try to make you convince, that they try to convince you is one guy, like in Damien the Omen, right? And make you think it's one guy, just like they make you think that the guy who shoots the president or who shoots the public official is just a lone crazy dude. Think about this. The woman who wound up getting shot in front of her child in front of the White House lawn, her name was Miriam. The guy who shot up the Navy Yard or whatever, his name was Aaron. The guy who burned himself up, original name was Elijah. Right? All of these are biblical characters from the Old Testament, man. Or Old and New Testament. Right? At the same time, they rushing into the seas of Lebanon. You got to understand, this Syrian thing that they want, that they trying to force this dude to okay, and trying to hold out on the Obamacare until he do, is going to put them in direct conflict now with people who can actually fight. The Syrians can fight. They've been training with the Russians since they was propped up by the Russians after the establishment of the the so-called Muslim Brotherhood that was spawned by the Jewish Caliph of Berlin, who was directly under Hitler. So they know how to fight. If they get into it with Israel, they're going to have to get into it with Hezbollah. And Hezbollah beat Israel twice. 3 times, I think, since them fighting. But they don't really advertise that over here. They beat them, right? Which means they know how to fight. Then they're going to have to fight, Iraq again. Because Iraq got a Shiite government. And they're trying to now make peace with the Kurds, who worship a black god named Malak Toss, who you know in the comic books is Dr. Manhattan. Wow. That's crazy. Right? Who we know as Dr. Manhattan, who we knew in ancient Kemet as Amun or Amen or Amen, the hidden one. That represents the blue period that our melanin went through in the transfiguration to where it began to rust and turn brown and black. The green period is when we were in the vegetative state in harmony with nature, like Poison Ivy and Batman, you know what I'm saying, where you had just as much chlorophyll content in your blood than you had as magnesium, copper, and iron. This is the era in which we were able, where everything was seen as a manifestation of the goddess, in which you would ingest aspects of the plants and you would go into what they call the green or the Emerald Kingdom and commune with the plants, and they tell you what's what, which ones to use. This is how they know everything, how they know what plants and stuff do what today. You can get a book called The Cosmic Serpent by James Narby that gets into that directly, as well as another book called DMT, The Spirit Molecule by Richard Straussman, I think. You might as well. Gospel Chicks is the biggest freak. So, if the Antichrist, they'd have made everybody convinced they're looking for one person. When the Antichrist is the Antichrist movement, you're talking about a group of people. So that means that the Antichrist is a group. That means that Christ got to be a group, a body politic, religious corporation. So under the acts of the tenets of the international Committee on International Organizations, any organization created with an ecclesiastical theme or what's called a Rotarian complexion is its own government. And ours happens to be connected to Muslim law, not Muslim law. So as good Muslims, we observe the Sabbath on Friday, you know what I'm saying? But we observe Christmas on Noble Joe Ali's birthday. You think it's a coincidence, like I said, that October 14th is supposed to be Cologne Day, on the same day in 1774 that we put down the Free National Constitution, on the same day that this dude allegedly landed over here, and the same day that we lost power over in Grenada? You tell me that's a coincidence? Just like it's a coincidence that on January 8th, just like it's a coincidence on January 8th, 1926, Abdul Aziz Amor, a black man, so-called black man, son of Ruth, right, goes and establishes the monarchy, and then in 1928, he hooks up with somebody born on January 8th, from the Carolinas, right, the original Carolinas, born outside the United States jurisdiction, and I just shown and proved to you that based on the Y chromosome of him being the son of John Drew, he could trace his lineage back over 385,000 years over here. So how am I a slave brought from Africa? But if I'm a Freemason, I'm taught to know that Africa is really a code for the earth. But I wouldn't know that if there wasn't somebody like C.M. Bay who didn't make me have to join a Freemasonic order, who put it out in a regular book for me to do the knowledge to it. Other Moors look at him as somebody who brought into the confusion. I wasn't there. All I'm doing the knowledge to is what's making sense for me enough now to convey it to the people in a manner that is consistent enough with the data presented. And what it looks like to me was that he basically was the one who didn't take the money and went out and set up something for people like us to be able to come back later and bring the civic and the law and the jurisprudence and all of that back to the temple without having to put a table toe around my neck or put on a dirty shirt and a cum-stained pants or whatever, that you done whatever you did to the other person, and have somebody, I don't know, fill me up to see if I'm a good Mason, fill my balls and all this other type of stuff. You don't have to do none of that. Okay. God don't make mistakes. So what we're going to strive to do is create a space for us to be able to convey this through our YouTube channel as opposed to this medium or just Blog Talk. We're eventually going to, I've been telling you for years, we're striving to phase out of this dead-end relationship based upon all of the breakdown of communication that has been taking place with them, especially when we start going in.
But I think also because the series is so about the knowledge, it's never been really about being seen and conveying it. So, we talked the other day and it was like, we have a YouTube channel that we can stream and, do stuff through. Why don't we do that? And, it was both like we were both kind of hesitant because so much of this, conveying of information is about the number of likes and is about being seen. And it's almost like a plethora of imagery about nothing. And instead of it being, something difficult to organize, it's just like, why don't we do exactly what we do on the radio, but, in our own home, right behind our own camera, and figure out how to sing it. So it's something we're kind of hesitant in doing because it's not about being seen all the time, but we're not afraid of being seen. It's just, this society is so much about image that we've strived to just make it about the information. But now that I think that we have the listeners' ears, I'm hoping that, Aseer can do an hour of this on Monday, and we can do more by being able to add a show. So definitely spread the word and keep the eye out. When we launch it, it'll be through the Aseer the Duketeers YouTube channel. And, it'll just be like almost like a Entertainment Tonight, but for Black people with a little bit of, social health stuff. But, keep it short, brief, and based on people's questions. So thank you for tuning in and being a support of ours for so long, and especially of the knowledge that Aseer, ascertains and is able to share with you guys every week. It's a passion of ours, and it's never been about being seen. But I'm like, shit, crazy people are on TV. We can do something right from our home, right from our cameras, and make it real simple. So, look out for it. Thanks so much, Super Heru Radio listeners. I love you guys. All right? Peace.
Yep, that's what it's pretty much about. It's going to be for Black people who know they're not Black, But when we say that, we don't mean Black, meaning whack. That Black is whack. We just not being Black like that. Like that means Black being like beat up and dejected and put as, descended from slave, 12 years of slavery, Like Aren't You Tired? That's why Django was so great, and they got rid of that as quick as they could because it showed you actually fighting back. In all of these slave movies, in all these slave pictures, you see a bunch of black people picking cotton, and you see a white man, one white man on a horse, one or two white men on a horse with a gun, and hundreds of black people doing the work, and nobody rebelling. You think it was always like that? The white man really believed that it was always like that. He redid his history so much that he believed that we didn't fight back. He believed all of the crazy shit about the history that he was passed on knowing. He believed it. He actually believed that he's an American. You understand? And this is hard to swallow because they got so many white males and white females, at such a high level of thinking themselves to be one thing that all they want to do is be the opposite. All they want to do is be able to twerk and shake their ass and be just as big and just as good and just as cool as the black people. That's a sickness in black people and white people. So those of us that know that you can't be a color and a human at the same time, you can't, the black crayon can't be a citizen of the crayon box. You understand? You got to come out and know and accept who and what you really are. And what you really are, unfortunately, my brothers and sisters, is something more. And I say it's unfortunate because a lot of us are not really ready to deal with it. So what we'll do is deject it and go to inferior systems and ignore people like me or people who sincerely coming in the name of the prophet in the temple and the great God Allah. This don't mean that I'm not into secular stuff and rapping and all that other type of stuff and drawing and comics. I'm into all of that stuff. Raising my children, raising my family, you know what I'm saying? However, if we're just doing that for ourselves, then we are contributing to worshiping the gods of Europe. And the gods of Europe say that they're supposed to do for you. Well, I'm a part of a Islamic trust that goes back all the way to creation. So I have more of a responsibility, and in that I choose to exhibit it like this. That don't make me no better than nobody else, and that don't make nobody else better than me. Especially people who feel that they got to wear aprons and got to meet in secret and shit like that to feel like they more special than everybody else, because that's the energy that got us here in the first place. That's the idolatry gods of Europe. There's no way that we created the situation to civilize the devil, and now the devil civilizing us with the same situation. It's irrelevant. It's erroneous, and it should no longer be tolerated. So anybody wants to holler at us about the temple we have consecrating out here, hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. If anybody wants to check out the world's most dangerous comic book novel, you can go to www.darkskull418.com. You could also check out www.aseertheducateers.com, as well as www.cookingmorewithless.com and www.sagaasad.com. So, yeah, check those things out. Hit me up. Anybody wants to send a donation, they really appreciate it, to dukeoftears@gmail.com through PayPal. And, again, man, thank you guys for putting up with the pseudo-censorship that comes from the bootleg intelligence people they got working in Smog Talk, a.k.a. Blog Talk. We're going to strive to move this into a higher location. Thanks to the people who tuned in about Amore's. Me and Amore's commercial, and me, Amore, and Selena's commercial, and for Apple. It was cool. And thank you guys for the support. Peace.